Welcome back to the deep dive. We're here to cut through the noise, pull out those key insights. Today, we're looking at the big stories from August 25th, 2025. We've dug into a whole stack of sources for you, news wires like Reuters, AP, global outlets too. The goal is to give you the clearest picture. What happened, why it's important, and what comes next. Our mission really is to get you quickly informed, help you connect the dots, maybe spark an aha moment or two.
Exactly. And August 25th, it was packed. We saw major developments in geopolitics, economic policies, some huge business moves, and, well, those ever-present environmental challenges. We'll unpack the crucial bits, look at the different angles where they pop up, and sort of put it all in context so you can really grasp what's significant.
Okay, let's get into it. Our first story, it takes us tragically to Gaza. Yeah, starting with some really tough news out of Gaza. An Israeli airstrike on August 25th, it hit near Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis. Sources are reporting at least 20 people killed. And here's something that really jumped out from the reports. It's incredibly tragic. 5 journalists were among the dead. People from Reuters, AP, Al Jazeera. They were working right there in the area. And the Associated Press noted the facility was hit twice, right as rescuers and reporters were rushing in after the first one.
That's a critical detail, yes. And what the sources really highlight is this, well, this recurring pattern, unfortunately. For almost a year now, Israel's campaign against Hamas has, as one source put it, repeatedly spilled into civilian areas and medical facilities. Now, Israel argues militants use these places for cover. Palestinian officials, though, they strongly counter that, saying nowhere is safe. And hospitals like Nasser, they become absolutely vital hubs, especially after multiple evacuations. They're often the last refuge. International groups have been warning over and over that Gaza's health system is basically near collapse. So any strike near a hospital complex gets intense scrutiny.
Right, and the reaction was, well, exactly what you expect. Swift and strong. Palestinian leaders, press freedom groups, they immediately condemn the strike. They're calling urgently for international protection for journalists, for medical sites. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, he called it a tragic mishap, expressed regret. Israel acknowledged the strike, promised an inquiry.
But this raises really profound questions, doesn't it? About accountability, about the actual rules of engagement in these conflict zones, that promised investigation. It's going to be a major test. Will there be real accountability? Will targeting procedures actually change? Sources are suggesting this incident, it could harden international opinion, especially at a tricky diplomatic time. It might even influence ceasefire talks and the deaths of journalists specifically. That's already deepened what they call a chilling effect on news gathering there. It just makes getting reliable information out even harder. And it's definitely reignited calls for independent monitoring of military actions.
So thinking about the takeaway for you, our listeners, what's the deeper insight here? This incident, it's obviously about the immense human cost of war, that's clear. But seeing journalists caught in the crossfire like this, it starkly highlights how crucial and how dangerous getting unfiltered information is, and how easily that access can be threatened, even accidentally, which can then distort how the world sees things, impact diplomacy, everything. It's like an information war running alongside the physical one. Okay, let's shift gears now, turning our attention to the United States. August 25th saw a pretty significant move from President Donald Trump, one that sent ripples through the financial markets almost immediately. He announced he was firing Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook, the reason he cited alleged improprieties on mortgage forms. But Governor Cook, she pushed back hard and fast, said the president simply doesn't have the authority to remove her, and that she planned to keep serving. So as our sources are saying, this looks like it's heading towards a legal test, really, of executive power over the Fed's board.
Yeah, this is way more than just politics as usual. It's a fundamental challenge to how the Federal Reserve is designed in the modern era. The governors, they're supposed to insulated from political removal except for cause. And cause usually means something pretty serious, like misconduct in office, not these kinds of allegations. That insulation is there for a very specific reason, to shield monetary policy from everyday politics, right? To keep the economy stable.
Now, this relationship, it's definitely been strained before. But sources tell us presidents haven't actually managed to fire sitting governors like this in the Fed's modern history. One economist actually said, Fed independence is like the air. You only notice it when it's gone.
You can imagine the market reaction. Everyone zeroed in on it. What does this mean for the Fed's independence? For upcoming rate decisions? Wall Street actually dipped that day. Investors were trying to figure out this controversy alongside everything else happening. Right. So the core issue really is that institutional independence. If this does end up in court, it could create a lot of uncertainty about how the central bank is governed. That could definitely roil markets, especially with critical inflation and jobs data coming up. And, if the move actually stands, it could open up another board seat. That might give the president more influence over monetary policy down the line.
And this wasn't the only move that day focusing on executive power, was it? There were other actions. President Trump also signed executive orders. One set up a specialized National Guard unit for police roles. Apparently, it's already patrolling D.C., and he mentioned potentially sending it to places like Chicago, Baltimore, citing crime issues. Then there was another order targeting cities with cashless bail practices.
What are those exactly?
That's where defendants can be released before trial without posting cash bail. The order threatens to cut federal funding to cities that don't comply within 30 days.
Ah, okay. So, taken together, these actions, they definitely paint a picture of asserting executive power. And it sparks these intense debates, doesn't it? Federal versus state authority, public safety versus civil liberties, or incarceration justice. Opinions, well, they're sharply divided. Supporters see it as necessary to tackle crime. Critics are warning about federal overreach, chipping away at local control.
So why does this matter to you? What's the takeaway? Well, these moves, they directly touch on the stability of our basic economic institutions. They shift the balance of power and how we're governed. And they really feed into these ongoing national conversations about justice, safety, individual rights. It's about the very structure of government and the economy. Okay, let's pivot now. A huge business story. This one could actually change your morning coffee routine. Keurig Dr Pepper, KDP, announced a massive $18 billion takeover of JDE Peet's, the Dutch coffee group, August 25th again. Yeah, this is Europe's biggest acquisition in over 2 years. But here's the really interesting twist. KDP also said that after the deal closes, they're splitting up into 2 separate U.S.-listed companies, one focused purely on coffee, the Global Coffee Co., the other handling their North America beverages business. In JDE Peet's, it gets delisted in Amsterdam. Its shares won't trade there anymore. It all comes under this new KDP structure.
What's fascinating here is seeing it in the context of all the consolidation that's been happening in coffee globally for, the last decade? You've got giants like Nestlé, the JAB-backed companies, Starbucks. They've all been carving up the market. KDP itself came from mergers, right? And they've clearly been wanting more international reach beyond just their U.S. pods and drinks. This deal looks like a big play to become a true global force.
Analysts seemed a bit divided. Called it bold, sure, but also costly. KDP shares actually dipped a bit initially. JDE Peet's shares jumped, though, because of the premium price.
So the big question is, what's the strategy behind such a dramatic move, this takeover and split? Well, the idea behind the breakup seems to be to unlock higher valuations, maybe get some cost savings too, by separating that potentially high-growth global coffee part from the more mature U.S. drinks business. But, our sources are quick to point out the risks. There are significant execution risks, things like volatile coffee bean prices, consumer tastes changing all the time, plus navigating all the regulatory hurdles in different countries. Still, if they pull it off, this deal definitely positions KDP to challenge Nestlé's dominance in coffee much more directly on the world stage.
So what's the bottom line for you, the coffee drinker? Well, beyond the finance headlines, this kind of mega deal really does affect the brands you see, maybe the innovation in your local cafe, the prices you pay. It impacts that global competition for your morning brew. It's a high-stakes game, playing out over your daily ritual. Okay, back to geopolitics for a moment. Another significant development in the Ukraine-Russia conflict on August 25th. Ukraine apparently escalated its drone strikes on Russian oil facilities, disrupting a, quote, significant share of Russia's refining capacity. And hitting export sites, too, right? This long-range kind of attrition warfare, it just continues. Ukrainian drones hitting refineries, export terminals. The clear goal seems to be weakening Russia's war economy, hitting their fuel supplies. Kiev, according to our sources, framed this as applying strategic pressure before any potential diplomatic talks.
And the interesting thing here is the double impact it has. These refinery strikes, they directly threaten Russia's own domestic fuel supplies and also their budget revenues from exports. So it raises the cost for them to keep the war going. And then on the very same day, President Zelensky announced Ukraine is aiming to get at least $1 billion each month from allies, specifically to buy U.S. weapons. So you see this pressure on Russia's economy happening at the same time as Ukraine shores up its defense funding. It's a critical dynamic.
And the immediate economic effect we saw. Oil prices ticked up a bit globally. Markets reacted to the supply risk from the refinery damage, plus just the ongoing war situation.
Yeah, and if we zoom out, look at the bigger picture. That fresh funding for Ukraine, if it comes through, could really help stabilize ammunition and air defense for them heading into winter. That's always a crucial time. And for the global economy, well, energy markets are still really sensitive to any disruption. Higher oil prices feed into global inflation, which complicates things for central banks trying to manage interest rates. It just shows how connected everything is.
So what does this mean for you? It's a clear reminder, isn't it? The war in Ukraine, it's not just some distant event on the news. It's escalation, the tactics being used, they can directly hit global energy prices. And that, consequently, affects your cost of living no matter where you are. That ripple effect is real. All right, our final deep dive today really highlights the undeniable impact of climate change. We saw two major natural disaster stories on August 25th. First, over in California. The picket fire was still raging in Napa County, a serious threat to the famous wine country. State of emergency was still in effect, firefighters battling this blaze. It had grown to almost 7,000 acres, and containment was really low, only about 13%.
Yeah, California's wine country is sadly no stranger to late summer wildfires. But what sources are emphasizing is how they've intensified in frequency and severity. It links directly to the hotter, drier conditions across the western U.S. Tourism, agriculture, local jobs, they're all incredibly vulnerable when fires close roads and smoke just blankets those beautiful valleys. Officials were saying some famous vineyards had been spared so far, but, with shifting winds and heat, the risk stayed really high. Just huge uncertainty.
And at the same time, literally on the other side of the planet, Typhoon Kajiki was bearing down on Vietnam. This was reported as Vietnam's strongest storm of the year. It forced the evacuation of hundreds of thousands of people. Schools closed, airports closed.
Vietnam gets hit by severe tropical storms frequently, of course. But again, like the California fires, the reports point to these events becoming increasingly destructive due to climate change. Emergency services were coordinating massive rescue and relief efforts, bracing for heavy floods, major wind damage, and it just raises these serious questions about infrastructure resilience, and a human cost for communities facing these stronger, more frequent extreme weather events.
So the critical takeaway here for you. What connects these two events, thousands of miles apart? They really drive home the vulnerability of whole sectors, whole communities everywhere to these climate-driven extremes. It underscores this urgent need for serious year-round mitigation. Everything from managing vegetation better, upgrading power grids, reforming insurance. It just highlights how climate change is hitting communities, hitting economies worldwide, demanding constant vigilance and, frankly, much faster adaptation from all of us. So looking back at August 25th, from the tragedy in Gaza, the high-stakes political moves in D.C., that massive coffee deal, the ongoing war in Ukraine, and these relentless extreme weather events, it really was a day that just underscored how interconnected everything is in our world.
It really did. These stories, they offer critical insights, don't they, into international law, economic stability, how markets consolidate, the global energy picture, and yeah, those urgent, growing climate challenges. Each event might seem separate, but they all weave together into this larger, really complex global tapestry.
So what's the lasting thought for you to take away today? It's really a reminder, I think, that understanding these individual threads helps you see the whole cloth. How a conflict far away can actually nudge global inflation, or how actions in the White House can test the independence of our financial system. It's about developing that habit of seeing the bigger picture.
Exactly. And maybe think about how these themes, accountability, institutional independence, market resilience, climate adaptation, how they'll keep evolving. How will those inquiries in Gaza actually proceed? What's the long-term impact of that huge coffee merger and split? And crucially, how will communities adapt to this increasingly volatile climate? These aren't just news items from one day, they are ongoing stories.
We definitely encourage you to keep exploring these topics, keep asking those big questions. That's all the time we have for this deep dive. Thanks so much for joining us.